Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a non-spoiler book review for Age of Assassins by R.J. Barker. On surface level, the synopsis of this story is going to sound very similar to Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I promise that the characters, the pacing, the tone, the writing style, all of that I felt was not really like Assassin's Apprentice, but the premise of the story is that we follow Girton Clubfoot, who is the apprentice to an assassin, and they, at the beginning of the story, are sort of forced to live within a castle around a bunch of nobles, and they are trying to prevent the death of a prince, and they are used because the idea is that who better to catch an assassin than other assassins. Girton truly doesn't have a whole lot of agency. He is very young. He kind of just has to do whatever his master tells him. So you can see where the comparisons could very easily be made. But like I said, and I stand by this, it's a very different story from Assassin's Apprentice, despite the very similar setup. First of all is our main character, Girton. So the whole story is told through Girton's point of view. You occasionally get flashbacks here and there, and I actually feel like the way the flashbacks were done, they're brief, they're very artistic, they add an extra element to the story and to the character and the relationship between Girton and his master, and they were like little sprinkles throughout the story. They weren't anything that felt extremely tedious. It wasn't something like the interludes in the Stormlight Archive or anything like that. So really truly the bulk of the story is first person point of view from Girton's perspective. Girton is very young, he's only around 15 years old, so there definitely is organic growth of the character throughout the story, which is something I always really love, but it never was so tremendous that it felt absolutely ridiculous. And also I feel like the character, he did act appropriately his age, which I know not everybody loves younger characters, but I was never extremely frustrated with him or found him extremely annoying. I thought it was done very well. I thought it captured the feeling of youth, the feeling of wanting to connect with other people, of realizing the things that you have not been afforded in your life, the things that you haven't just had that are pretty much standard for most other people, which has to do with his experiences and the difficulties he's had growing up. I don't know, I just felt like Girton was a very likable character. He could be, sometimes he could be a 15-year-old, he could be a little emotional, but overall I quite enjoyed him. Because of his age, I think it's fair to wonder if this book would have been better as young adult instead of adult, but I do think the tone is more mature without being extremely explicit or grotesque or anything like that. It does touch on some pretty serious topics, but it's done, I feel, in a very tasteful way. Of course, that's subjective. It's known when sad things happen, it's known when terrible things or violent things happen, but it's not something that we zoom in on and end up making a really big deal out of. It's just kind of the way of the world, which I think made the setting feel very realistic. On the topic of the setting, this is kind of your classic medieval-esque European-inspired setting, and if you are somebody who enjoys that in your fantasy, then this is gonna fit that perfectly, even though I think it's almost the default at this point for fantasy books to be Western European inspired. I still do enjoy it. It can be so extremely explicit, and sometimes it feels like an excuse to have a lot of violence, especially things like violence against women throughout the story, and it's not really dealt with particularly well sometimes, in my opinion, whereas in this book, there are times where it's hinted at, okay, well, women don't always have as much ability as other people in their day-to-day lives. If you have any kind of deformity or disability, people are going to zero in on that. They're going to make fun of you. They're going to think less of you. And that's true of our main character. There are slaves in the world. And then there are just the differences of class. All of that is present within the story. But it does end up making the setting just feel more realized and realistic. I also really liked the main character's master. And when I say master, I don't mean that he is a slave to this person. I mean, he calls her master. It's like his mentor figure. I love the mentor relationship between Girton and his master. It's a woman, which I thought was an interesting decision because you usually don't see that dynamic. You often see the mentor to a boy being a man, or you see the mentor to a girl being a man, or a girl to a woman. But I feel like it's rare to see a boy and a woman. And there were some elements that felt almost motherly in the master's affection to Girton. And the way that you kind of see their relationship in some of those little flashbacks sprinkled in, I absolutely loved. I loved that character. I was like, please, please, please. I don't want the trope of the mentor figure dying to happen. I obviously can't say if it does or does not, but I cared about this character, and we don't always see her very often, but I just thought she was awesome. She was so down to business. She was blunt. She was brutal. She was efficient. But she also very much cared for the character. There was also no weird sexualization of her, which I really appreciated, because I feel like it could have easily gone down that route, and it didn't, which I was really grateful for. If you're a fan of Wheel of Time and you really like the character Moraine, I think you'll like this element of this story and that particular character quite a bit. The stories themselves and the scope of the world is obviously much more condensed in this than Wheel of Time, but just that particular element I think you'll appreciate. I will say a con for probably a lot of other people, and something that I mean, maybe I would have liked it slightly different, is just the fact that we do only see the story through Girton's point of view, and Girton doesn't always really get all the information. He'll see certain things and then he'll report back to his master, because again, the idea is that they are present within this castle to catch an assassin, to find out who is trying to kill the heir to the throne. But it's really more his master that's taking care of stuff. He'll observe things, he'll see things happening, and then he's like, I saw this, I heard this, is this suspicious? I don't know. And she's like, okay, just tell me and I'll figure it out. Sometimes she'll tell him, like, don't go talk to that person, don't go near that person, stop befriending that person, you should go befriend this person. And she'll give him some guidelines of what he should maybe do or not do. But I kind of wish we'd gotten her perspective a little bit, or at least somebody else within the castle. I think that could have added an interesting element. Of course, it didn't need to be there. I think that part of it was a little bit of a mystery, where if you had gotten another character's point of view, maybe it would have been too obvious what was going on. But a little bit for me, some of the reveals were not quite as impactful at the end, because of the fact that I didn't really have the connection to those other characters as much. The other players on the board, if you will, I just feel like we didn't get as much interaction with them. It was really more about Girton. It was a little bit of a coming of age story. It was Girton trying to find himself in a world where, because of the fact that he has a club foot, he is not ever going to be truly accepted because of his upbringing, the fact that he was a slave when he was younger and then now has this relationship with his mentor. He doesn't really have a lot of possibilities in his life. It's a lot of that. It's kind of just a character-focused story, which I liked, but I do feel like some of those reveals could have hit harder if it had been told slightly different. I will say, though, by having the story told just through Girton's point of view, there are a lot of moral dilemmas that come up. They are not exactly hired to do the right thing. They are hired to do whatever their employer tells them to do. Being an assassin and an assassin's apprentice, you really don't get to decide to be the hero. You just do your job, and then that's it. So there are times when Girton is faced with certain decisions where he either goes against his master and goes against what they are tasked to do, which could put his master in danger, it could put him in danger, or he chooses to do something different, which would then result in harm coming to other people, and sometimes people that he has developed feelings for, whether that's romantic or platonic or anything like that. Doesn't matter. There are just times when he sees somebody and he's like, I think this person is innocent. I don't kind of feel like this is the right move. And again, because his mentor is very brutal and she knows her business, she's the best assassin in the land, essentially. She's like, it doesn't matter. You have to get over it. Suppress those emotions. And he's like, but I don't want to. And sometimes I'm like, I don't want you to either, but also I really like your mentor, so maybe do what she says. I don't know. And I liked that we had to explore those moral dilemmas alongside him. Something that will most definitely not be to everybody's liking is that this is a very closed story, meaning it's not this big open world. You have just this one kind of small setting, and then sometimes he gets outside the castle just a little bit, but not a lot. There's not a ton of action either, and because he's not really involved in all of the politics that are going on, he just sees stuff and reports. There's also not a lot of, like, juicy intrigue. It really is just, oh, Girton, I want you to be friends with that guy because I feel kind of bad for him, but I know you're not supposed to. That priest guy seemed creepy. The king, something's up with him. And you just kind of see stuff. And then if you're gonna like this book, you're gonna like it because you're enjoying following Girton and you like the relationship between him and his master. But if you're looking for some big epic fantasy story, that's not really what you're gonna get with this. I am a very character-driven reader, so I never felt like the book was super slow. I always enjoyed my time with it. Also, the audiobook narrator I thought was very good, so I enjoyed the narration. But I feel like it's possible that some people will find this book a little boring or they won't feel that invested in it. But if you are a character-driven reader, I would highly recommend this. If you are a very plot-driven reader, I don't know if you'll love it. If you do love a good mystery, you might actually not mind that he's not involved in everything as much, because you might enjoy only getting glimpses of things and trying to piece together who is who and who's what and who done it sort of a situation. There are also times where within this book it is hinting at a bigger world, so I am excited to see where the sequels go, but this first one is quite contained. You can read it almost as a standalone, which I think is really fun. A lot of times we either get fantasy standalones or we get series that are very clearly not done. So it's kind of nice and refreshing every now and then to get a book where you could just put it down and have the one book. And if you wanted to keep going, you could also do that. The last thing I'll mention, because I know a lot of people love to know, there is a slight romance in the story, but I would not say there's a romance really, because it's just more of a part of who Girton is and a human emotion and him being attracted to somebody, and it's not really the main focus of the story. There's not this big like, will they, won't they? It's just, oh, this is a part of life. And so if you're somebody who doesn't usually like romance in your books, I don't think you'll mind the level of romance in this. If you love a romance in your book, you're probably going to be disappointed in that department. If you've read this story, definitely let me know your thoughts on it. I would love to know. Let me know if it sounds like something you would be interested in. And if you do get around to it later in the future, definitely feel free to let me know your thoughts. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.